All right, so we're going to look at making prints. This is lesson 2, but like lesson PowerPoint 3, lesson 2. All right. So as a review, fingerprint analysts are tasked with the difficult job of physically analyzing the prints in order to make a match. So what do? They look for the points of comparison in common between the crime scene print and the evidence prints. So the points of comparison that they look at are those minutia patterns, like the forks and the bifurcations, the bridges, the eyes, the enclosures, the dots, all of those things. But here's the thing. There's no set number of minutia patterns that have to be in common before a match is declared. However, usually it's between 8 to 16 that are declared before the match is confirmed. And remember, it's not like this lab has to have 16, so this lab has to have 16, so this one. Each lab is different, and they each choose how many they need before the match is declared or confirmed. So we have this movie. Just give me a sec because I do have to play. It's really, really short.
Doing something for me for a change was getting my education. So
sorry about this.
Purdue Global was the way to go.
In 19th century Argentina, Inspector Eduardo Alvarez is pushing the limits of forensic science. He hopes to prove whether a man suspected of murdering 2 young children is guilty or not. And he's going to do it in a way that no one's ever done before. By using a bloody fingerprint left at the crime scene. While Alvarez had the critical insight that this could be possible, he does not have the science background to test his theory. Fortunately, he knows someone who does, his friend and mentor, Juan Vucetich. Vucetich had been studying fingerprints for years.
He had understood that they were individual, that they didn't change through life, that they were valuable pieces of information for identity.
But how will they know for sure if the prints match up?
What they were looking at is the pattern of what we call friction ridges, and that's what allows us to grasp and hold stuff.
But the arrangement of the friction ridges is complex. There are all kinds of lines and circles and dots. So Vucetich comes up with a way to simplify the classification of fingerprints, a method that's still in use today. Each fingerprint is dominated by one of 3 primary patterns. The first is an arch, which is like a tent. The second is a loop, like one made with a shoestring. And the third is called a whorl, which looks like a whirlpool. Vucetich proposed using these patterns as a sorting tool. If 2 prints prove to be different types, there's no need to look any further. But if they're in the same category, then they're worth a closer look.
You look at the individual points, the ending ridges, the splitting ridges, the dots that appear.
Ridge endings are places where the ridges start and stop as they flow through the pattern. In other places, a ridge will split in 2, also known as a bifurcation. A dot is a ridge that is as long as it is wide. The unique arrangement of these ridge characteristics clearly distinguishes one print from another. Vucetich spends hours studying the 2 prints, ridge by ridge, trying to match dots, bifurcations, and ridge endings. He's looking for these characteristics to match up in the same location and in the same arrangement. But the more he looks, the more he realizes the fingerprints don't match.
Okay, so we saw that. All right, so after seeing what we just did, we saw how they analyze the different types of fingerprints. So when we get to a crime scene, or when there is a crime scene, the prints they look for, there are 3 types of prints they actually look for at a crime scene. The first type is called a visible print or a patent print. These are made by fingers touching surface after ridges have been in contact with a colored material like blood, paint, dirt, ink, etc. And another type of patent print or plastic print is an impression. Ridge impressions left on soft material. So like if there's putty, if you've ever played with putty, you notice you can leave like fingerprints. Same with waxes, soap, dust, and that type of stuff. And then the last type you have is like the latent prints. These are the invisible ones. These are the ones that are secreted by the oils and left by your fingers that you can't see. So when you touch your phone and it leaves that fingerprint, those are considered latent prints. Locating visible or plastic prints at a crime scene normally presents little problem to an investigator because those are the patent. Those are kind of easy to see. Locating those latent prints, however, are much more difficult because they're invisible. You can't really see them. They have to be made visible. So there have been recent advances in fingerprint technology that have led to the development of ultraviolet image converter for the purpose of detecting these latent prints, these invisible prints. This device is called a reflected ultraviolet imaging system, RUVIS. And it can locate prints on most non-absorbent surfaces without the aid of chemicals or powders, which can ruin those prints. So the RUVIS allows investigators to view surfaces for presence of untreated fingerprints. Remember, no chemicals, no powders or anything. So you can see this, and it looks kind of like a telescope type thing. And it, the ultraviolet, this is outside of our visible light range, so it makes it visible to us. And so when it goes to fingerprinting those, like the patent prints, the ones that we can see, or even those ones that we can't, like you detect it and you're like, oh, there's one. You can use fingerprint powders to make those latent prints visible. There are a variety of powders. There's a whole bunch of them. They come in various colors, compositions that can be applied with different brushes and wands. Experienced examiners find that gray and black powders are adequate for most latent print work. Gray you would use towards like a dark colored background, like a black background, whereas black you'd want to use for a light colored background. When using powders, investigators must be extra careful not to destroy the prints when dusting and lifting prints. If you add too much dust to the print, it will actually destroy the print. And if you destroy the print, there's no coming back from that. That's it. That's all the chance you get. You get one or done. That's it. There are other methods for collecting fingerprints besides dusting and the RUVIS. Sorry, my bad. The other methods are iodide fuming, anhydride chemical reaction, and then superglue fuming. All of these do pose toxic vapors you really don't want to be inhaling. And so right here, we're going to watch this last little video on how to dust for prints. Let me make this big.
Fingerprints are one of the most commonly used forensic evidence all over the world and can be recovered in multiple ways according to the surface they're on. Some approaches are more traditional and some are more dependent on modern technology. If someone has left prints behind, there's probably a way to find them. Every day we touch things such as a coffee cup, a car door, or a computer keyboard. Each time we do, it's likely that we leave behind our fingerprints, which is like our unique signature. As no two people have the exact same fingerprints. Even identical twins with virtually indistinguishable DNA have different fingerprints. This uniqueness allows fingerprints to be used in all sorts of ways, including for background checks, biometric security, mass disaster identification, and in criminal situations. Fingerprint analysis has been used to identify suspects and solve crimes for more than 100 years. It remains an extremely valuable tool for law enforcement. One of the most important uses for fingerprints is to help investigators link one crime scene to another involving the same person. Latent prints are not readily visible to the naked eye. As a result, these invisible prints must be developed in some way to increase their visibility and contrast. One of the most common methods for developing and collecting latent fingerprints is by dusting a smooth or non-porous surface with fingerprint powder. If any prints appear, they are photographed and then lifted from the surface with clear adhesive tape. The lifting tape is then placed on a latent lift card to preserve the print. It's not as simple as getting out a bristly brush with powder and sweeping it across any wine glass or bureau. There's a method to developing and recovering fingerprints. Fingers are coated with perspiration. Fingerprints often leave residues of oil in the shape of the friction ridge, creating latent prints on everything you touch. That's the stuff that powders pick up. The friction ridge skin itself does not secrete oils, and some fingerprints will only leave residues of amino acids and other compounds, which the powder does not adhere to well. Dusting involves using a camel hair or fiberglass brush and fine powders. Magnetic powders are also used, where a fine magnetic powder is held by a magnetic applicator, which may then be gently moved across the fingerprint. This often protects the print better because there are no bristles touching the surface. The movement you make with your wrist depends largely on the surface, the tool, and the powder you're utilizing for the task. The process of dusting for fingerprints involves various methods and tends to get the particles of the powder to adhere to the residues left by the friction-ridged skin of the fingers, palms, or feet. Fingerprint powders have many formulations, and the appropriate powder must be used on the appropriate surface. For example, dark-colored powders will show fingerprints far better on a light surface. The action of such brushes is mostly from the side, not the tip. Contact releases the powder held by capillary action. A common mistake is to use too much powder. Only a very small amount is needed, especially if the brush has been used before. Excess powder will make it a lot messier, and it's easier to add more powder than it is to remove it from the brush. Apply the powder to the bottom sides of the brush by lightly spinning it against the inside of the lid. Once some powder is on the brush, lightly spin it with 2 fingers so the sides of the brush go over the print. When the powder is brushed onto the surface, it works by mechanically adhering to the oil and moisture components of the latent print. When the powder particles adhere to the grease or moisture forming the latent prints, it causes them to become visible. The developed latent print should be observable and can be photographed, lifted, and examined. A piece of clear tape can be used to lift the print. It may take some practice to get a hang of this technique. Also try to experiment and see what works best for you. Fingerprints are the most incriminating types of evidence in criminal cases because it's one of the most reliable forms of identification. No two people have the same fingerprint, making it a truly fundamental tool for accurate identification of criminals. Only when fingerprints can't be traced back to a person with a criminal history do they have less power in an investigation. If you enjoyed the video, like, share, and subscribe.
Okay, so sorry, this is a little bit longer than normal. And I believe so. Once fingerprints are identified and collected, like you saw, they're run against a digital program called the AFIS, or the Automated Fingerprint Identification System. It contains nearly 50 million fingerprint records, and they're shared across multiple agencies so that they're all connected and not just like individual ones. This computer system has the ability to scan digitally and digitally encode those fingerprints so that they can be subjected to high-speed computer processing, which can process more fingerprints faster than normal humans can. The fingerprint is converted into a digital minutia, then that is used in the program's algorithm to determine the degree of correlation between a crime scene print and prints within the database. So this is an example. And again, there is a human component where they're making sure everything matches up, and they're clicking on the minutia points that they're looking for. But that's the gist of it. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I hope you guys have a great night.